This is not a peace plan. A peace plan takes into account the interests and concerns of two parties.
What they're not willing to discuss is a political solution, because a political solution would most likely break apart the Israeli government itself.
The Hamas is caught in a trap because if they do not accept it, they will be annihilated.
It does not look like the Israelis are interested in giving it any actual political authority.
The 20-point peace plan for Gaza, announced after the US President Donald Trump met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House last Monday, seems at this point as if it's been set up to fail. Is it doomed to failure? Or could it be a geopolitical turning point, bringing key Islamic states like Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar, and Britain and Germany into the greater Middle East as guarantors? Once powerful players like Russia, which backed its Middle East proxy Syria, and China, which had brought Tehran and Riyadh together, are they being edged out? And does this weaken the other big player in the game, Iran? Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have got everything he wanted. But has he? The 20-point Gaza peace plan calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the resumption of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza, the release of all 20 surviving hostages, which was expected to happen within 72 hours of Hamas saying yes. That hasn't happened so far. In return, Israel has offered to release over 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. What happens the day after? Will Hamas walk away? Israeli Defense Forces continue to bombard Gaza. Its navy has just stopped a flotilla from delivering humanitarian aid by sea. Is a Palestinian state an actual possibility? The United Nations New York Declaration for a two-state Palestinian state presented by Saudi Arabia and France won the backing of some 148 nations. But following on from Gaza's de-radicalization, its reconstruction under a non-political body, the plan envisages Trump and former British Premier Tony Blair heading a board of peace that is expected to run Gaza alongside a reconstituted Palestinian Authority minus Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing backed coalition government does not back a Gaza ceasefire. And to me, that doesn't say much for the Gaza plan being implemented in letter and spirit. What does Israel stand to gain from this? Why do they all sound so positive? Has Netanyahu's hand been forced, as the majority of Israelis are fed up with the war? Hello everyone, I'm Neena Gopal. Welcome to Global Express, where we look beyond the news. Please click on the new Indian Express website and watch and share. Talking to us today are eminent experts on the region, Ambassador Talmeez Ahmed, who has served in the Middle East as ambassador to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Oman, and was posted to Yemen, Kuwait and Iraq. His insight into the region is invaluable, particularly to reporters like me who covered the Middle East. An analyst, writer, commentator, he has 3 books under his belt, including one on the Arab Spring, a must-read. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Rouzbeh Parsi is a senior lecturer at Lund University, Sweden, and the director of the Europe-Iran Research Group. He specializes in Iran and the Middle East, formerly a senior analyst at the EU Institute for Security Studies in Paris, covering Iran, Iraq, and the Arabian Gulf. He's an expert on Iran's nuclear capabilities and its nuclear strategy. Welcome, Professor Parsi.
Thank you.
First question to you, Ambassador, although Mr. Parsi does have to go very quickly, but let me ask you this, Ambassador. 60-day truce hasn't kicked in. The world is still waiting to hear from Hamas. What and when and what can we expect to hear from Hamas? Because the major Arab and Muslim nations, which we've all been listed, have all welcomed this announcement, the Gaza plan. What made them back it, Ambassador?
There are 2 questions that you have put. One is about Hamas's response and what is the likely response, and the other is about the Arab and Islamic states. Hamas, this is not a peace plan. A peace plan takes into account the interests and concerns of two parties. This one only takes into account the interests of Israel and specifically of Prime Minister Netanyahu. to demand from Hamas that they should surrender all the hostages within 72 hours, that they should be disarmed, there would be sustained occupation of Gaza, there will be deliberate destruction of all facilities that still remain, and there is also a latent threat that anyone who doesn't lay down his arms is going to be annihilated. This is not a peace plan by any stretch of imagination. Therefore, but the Hamas is caught in a trap, because if they do not accept it, as the Donald Trump has said, they will be annihilated. They will be
That's
hell
right.
to pay. And this is what Netanyahu wants. He is least interested in either a peace plan, a ceasefire, or the release of hostages. If he was interested in the hostages, he would have worked harder for them. They have been hostages now for 2 years. So there is no, therefore, what really they have made the plan, they have made this proposal so onerous, so obnoxious, so unacceptable that they actually desperately want Hamas to say no. But Hamas knows that what happens is the minute they say no, anything that happens now will be blamed upon them. Any deaths of the Palestinians will be blamed on Hamas. Any hostage who is killed will be blamed on Hamas. So that is where we are. The second part that you asked is about the Arab and Islamic support or not. There has been a deliberate and conscious misrepresentation in global media about what they have said. There is
I
no
see.
indication in their document that they support the peace plan. What they have said is that they welcome the efforts of the American president. That is the first point. Secondly, they have put down very detailed requirements for such a plan to be successful, and that calls for the total withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, the end of fighting, the rebuilding of Gaza. The third part of their statement is even more important. It looks at the longer term, where they call for a comprehensive dialogue on all issues, where they offer their support, and they said it must culminate in a two-state solution. None of this is being mentioned in the American media. None of this is being mentioned in the Israeli media. It is as if the Arabs have surrendered in front of the Americans and want to get it. They've used polite language, as far as because they are diplomats. They know that President Trump is a megalomaniac. That he likes to be flattered. He was desperate to get the Nobel Peace Prize, so he wants to look like a peacemaker, and therefore they have been polite to him. But that does not mean that they have accepted this wretched plan. It is not a peace plan. It is
Yeah.
a surrender document.
So, Dr. Rouzbeh Parsi, do you agree with that? Do you say these very same proposals were part of the discussion that was going on in Doha, in Qatar, between Qatar and the Hamas and the Israelis? I mean, these proposals had apparently run aground over whether Hamas will agree to a demand to disarm, whether Israel will agree to withdraw from Gaza, whether the Rafah crossing from Egypt will be kept open, and over humanitarian aid. And as you've seen in the last couple of days, the humanitarian aid that has come through that flotilla by human rights activists was stopped. So the big question that I have is, what was it that brought Israel to the negotiating table? At least it looks. Was it Israel's attack on Doha that made the Arab and Muslim leaders come together and sort of, not 100%, but maybe propose these, all these points again on the hostage, swaps and the ceasefire?
Well, I think obviously what the countries in the Gulf and the Organization of Islamic Countries and so on, what they're trying to do is to take a bit of an initiative to indicate and make clear that the willingness to peace and some kind of constructive way forward does exist on their side, but that the Americans, in a sense, are simply just parroting and listening to the Israelis, who are claiming that there is no partner for that peace discussion. So that's one. The second is to also make clear and kind of push back on some of the fantasies in DC about how Gaza can be reconstructed without any political process. So it's more like a rebuilding of a destroyed neighborhood than a political process in which you also rebuild. And I think that's a very important distinction because that's where the Israelis then have great difficulty to even on a kind of a theatrical way just say yes because they are willing to potentially discuss technical aspects of what can be done for the next week in Gaza, if that means that there will be less pressure on them from the Europeans and American. But what they're not willing to discuss is a political solution, because a political solution would most likely break apart the Israeli government itself. Large parts of it do not recognize any legitimacy for a Palestinian state, and Netanyahu himself is been one of the people who spearheaded that very idea. That is, that there can never be an independent Palestinian state, and he pushed back on the Trump peace plan within 48 hours on that regard.
So are you saying then that it's actually a big sham? That, even the Arab leaders who've been supposedly effusive in their praise of the deal, I mean, they've offered to engage positively and constructively with the US on finalizing the agreement, ensuring its implementation. All that is they're just talking. It doesn't actually mean anything. Is that what you're saying, Professor?
Well, basically, you can say that in politics, you do participate in these things, even if you're very skeptical about their potential of actual, reaching something that looks like a concrete answer. You participate partly because you have to. In this case, ignoring the American president is not a very good idea. But secondly, you never know. Maybe in all of this, and a lot of it is just hot air, maybe something tangible can come out if you can help and steer him in a direction that is much more concrete. The problem with the Trump administration in general is that they're not very good at process. So that means that you get these large headlines and these general, very generic statements, but there is no tangible, operational, step by step, this is how it's going to get done so that it actually does get done. And
so you're basically saying that even the Palestinian Authority, which has welcomed Trump's efforts, is just saying the what predictable, taking a predictable line, but in actual fact does not believe it's going to go anywhere.
Well, it's very unlikely that it's going to go anywhere. But A, you cannot afford to kind of offend the Americans on this, and B, just in case that 5% chance that it might go somewhere, you need to be there to make sure that those 5% go in the right direction. So in that sense, no one can afford not to be there, though I very much doubt that anyone thinks this is going to lead anywhere.
No, and the other thing, Professor Parsi, I was also interested in this temporary transition government that they're talking about, this technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee. And, also saying that this economic redevelopment plan to build Gaza will bring in a Palestinian Authority that is reformed. So it's not the same people who will be doing business that they're currently talking to. And, and I'm also very fascinated by the role of Tony Blair, the former UK Prime Minister. What is that about? Because reports in The Guardian that I read were being very critical of Blair's track record in the US-led invasion of Iraq, where I know Mr. Ambassador Talmeez Ahmed was in Baghdad at that time. So could you tell us, Professor Parsi, what is it? Why have Trump and the British picked the Blair Foundation?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's remember that the idea that there can be technocratic groups of experts to govern part or all of what would become a Palestinian state is not a new idea. I mean, the Palestinian Authority itself has had a number of prime ministers who are said and actually have been technocrats. And the idea of that is that they would have more legitimacy. They would not be as dependent on the other more political parts of the Palestinian Authority, especially Fatah and other, old school organizations that comprise it, because they lack legitimacy, they're corrupt and so on. The problem, of course, is that a technocratic government in the end still needs not only legitimacy, but also the authority to govern. And that has always been the problem for the technocratic prime ministers in the Palestinian territories, is that on the one hand, they have to contend with Mahmoud Abbas and the others from Fatah, but they also have to contend with the Israelis who don't really want to give them much of a mandate when it comes to actual governing. So the idea that somehow making all of this into some kind of technocratic entity will shed it of old debris and at the same time give it a mandate by definition to govern is a bit of a illusion, because without the political authority, it will not be able to govern. And it does not look like the Israelis are interested in giving it any actual political authority. As far as Tony Blair is concerned, well, I mean, basically, he's a person who has been able to survive all the missteps that he has been partly responsible for. And I think within those circles, in the kind of Anglo uh, English circles of politics, he is still very popular and very much a player. And that's
Is
the
that
only
so?
reason why he would end up here. He has absolutely no authority, no competence, and not a very stellar track record when it comes to these things.
Ambassador Talmeez Ahmed, if I can come back to you, the other big point which I looked at in the 20-point peace plan is the international stabilization force they're talking about, which is supposed to be deployed in Gaza. This apparently will see the ISF vet and train Palestinians, manning a police force in Gaza. Will Israel actually allow this? Because the IDF handing over Gaza to the ISF is one slightly improbable, area, and the other one is the ISF then handing over power to actual Gazan residents. So, I mean, would that be the scenario, or will it be international peacekeeping forces? They're talking about Pakistan coming in, so could Bangladesh, and the IDF itself is going to, ring fence, Gaza, because it definitely doesn't want to see anything happen. There's a lot of speculation that if Israeli forces attack, or if Gaza actually goes, crumbles again, then Israeli forces will go back into Gaza.
You see, before this international stabilization force becomes a reality, there is a paragraph before that which says that the IDF will exercise total control over Gaza, will ensure the destruction of all threats to Israel, will ensure that all the facilities that Hamas have enjoyed will be destroyed. There is no time frame within which Israel will carry out these interventions. Most of us would say that this is open-ended, and that these words about international stabilization force is just that much space in which nobody has credibility. As far as we have heard, every statement that has come from the Israeli government, and particularly from the right wing elements in the government who have a veto power on everything that Netanyahu does, they have made it very clear they are not withdrawing from Gaza.
I
Gaza is
see.
going to be, and over a period of time, they have even talked about putting in certain settlements. We don't know. My main point is that let us not take any of this too seriously. There is only one point in which Netanyahu was interested, and that too because of domestic pressure, and that is the hostages. He gets the hostages back. After that, he has no interest whatsoever in anything that is written in this scrap of paper. He will carry out exactly what he has been doing up to now, that is genocide, continued destruction in the name of annihilating Hamas. Many of you will remember that in the book War, Biden is quoted as telling Netanyahu that Bibi, you are wrong. You cannot win. You have no strategy. You cannot annihilate Hamas, because Hamas is not just people, it is an idea. And you can
Yeah.
only annihilate or end an idea after you have addressed the issues that had given birth to the idea. And of course, you know that Netanyahu pretended he didn't understand any of this. He has no interest whatsoever. There is no day after as far as
Yeah.
Israel is concerned. So please don't take this thing too seriously. This stabilization force, we don't know who is going to join it. We don't know what their role will be. Will they be there to protect the Palestinian people, the remaining Palestinian people from the Israeli forces? Do they have police duties to protect the people from ruffians and crooks and murderers? We don't know. So I would find it very difficult to take any of this too seriously.
The whole idea of keeping it under providing security in the coming months is something apparently that Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan and the UAE have proposed, and I mean Saudi Arabia in particular
There is no
has
such indication. I must differ with you, Neena.
yeah.
There is no indication that specific Arab countries will provide troops because they will be seen as an occupation force.
Yes.
They will be sent into a territory where they have seen this mass genocide of their people, of their fellow Arabs, while they stood on the sidelines. That is why no country in the world is willing to attach its name to this so called stabilization force. And I do not imagine, and this is what the Americans would want. And to some extent, when the entire territory has been annihilated, which could be after 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years, they would want some force so that they can then withdraw in peace and give security responsibilities for their beleaguered enclave to somebody else. And the Arabs are not stupid enough to fall into that trap. So I am not going to
Mm.
pretend to you that
Oh.
we have any idea about the composition of this force.
That's very interesting because I mean we also know that Trump has basically said that he doesn't want troops on the ground. He doesn't want to deploy troops on the ground. He does want to parcel it out to people like the
The
countries
last
like
thing he wants
Pakistan.
are American troops because each and every one of them will be a target. He's got this
Absolutely.
big cross at the back of his back and people will shoot. So let us imagine, please do not forget, the Palestinian people have been given an extraordinary experience of genocide, which the international community has watched on its television screens. Israelis have made no attempt to really cover it up, though they have murdered 200 journalists in the process, targeted killings of 200 journalists. They have also killed doctors, they have destroyed hospitals, they are now denying food to young people, to the people of Gaza. So let us not have any illusions in this regard. Netanyahu wants the hostages because he's under tremendous domestic pressure. The last thing he wants is peace because the questions relating to 7th October have not withered away. The mass killing of Palestinians has not yet taken away the total failure of his government in protecting the Israeli people on that day.
Yeah, there's also a very startling article by a Palestinian journalist that I read who says she was one of several journalists who tracked Israeli aircraft flying over Gaza, landing on British aircraft runways, through March, through May this year, and helping Israeli aircraft refueling. I mean, I suppose working with the British Air Force, but that's a story for another day, I suppose. But Europe, I mean, I'm curious about why even the German Chancellor, he also backed the Gaza plan. Why would Europe invest in something and back something like this, knowing full well that it's not really still fair on the Gazans?
You see, Europe has no strategic value whatsoever, whether it is Europe or whether it is any other global issue. They are not relevant. They have been emasculated willingly after the Second World War. The United States took care of their responsibility and they went along and they made money and they became a developed space. Suddenly, Donald Trump has come and said that you have to pay for your own security, and they are terrified. They have no military capacity worth the name. Their soldiers have not fought from after the Second World War anywhere in the world worth any worthwhile action anywhere in the world. They have not fought. They are very, very badly equipped.
The French and the British did serve in Afghanistan.
The French and the British have fought against militia and have been continuously defeated. And the French, very recently left Central Africa with ignominy. They were thrown
That's true.
out with ignominy and humiliation. And that this has also happened with the British. We know in the case of Iraq, the Americans complained about the poor quality of British fighting force. But I don't want to waste my time on that. The main point is where Germany is concerned. It is one of the most confused countries in the world because on the one hand they want to pretend that they have a future as as European leaders, but on the other hand they also have the war guilt, the guilt for the Holocaust. Hence, you find a dithering chancellor who can't get a coherent sentence out, and sometimes he is totally supportive of Israel, and sometimes he says he's very unhappy with Israel and wants the killing to stop. There is this kind of neither here nor there approach of Europe is still very much alive because they don't know. They simply do not know how to handle a serious crisis. And frankly speaking, they're incapable of taking any responsibility whatsoever.
Which is why also the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is so controversial, as is also going to be allowed to stay on, which I think should also there should questions should be asked about that. But the other interesting aspect in this whole game, Ambassador, is the U.S. Qatar defense agreement that has just been signed. Where the US has given this, I mean, it said Trump's no new wars pledge was supposed to be relevant for his second term, but it's suddenly, here you have the US saying any attack on Doha will be seen as an attack on the US. I mean, it's equivalent to NATO's.
With
It's
deep respect to the American president, he
yes.
has somehow no understanding of what is happening in the region, and he has no understanding of what the region is thinking. He has a very poor opinion of the capacity of the people of the Gulf to comprehend complex issues. As far as the Gulf is concerned, Israel gave a very, very clear message when they attacked Qatar, made it
Mm.
very clear that they are the region's military hegemon, that no target in the region is beyond their capacity. They can destroy royal families and palaces. They can destroy military facilities. They can destroy and they can destroy infrastructure at will. This message has already been given, and the Americans already had a security agreement with the different Arab Gulf countries.
With
With
They
Saudi
Saudi
had
Arabia,
Arabia.
their own base, which is located 20 miles or 30, 35 kilometers away from the place that was
from
targeted.
Doha, yes.
Obviously, they had full knowledge of the incoming missiles and the aircraft that were going to land, they were going to launch those attacks. Not one of them shared any such information with the Qataris, whose hospitality they are enjoying today. At this stage, it was so embarrassing for the American president to pick up a telephone and force the Israeli prime minister to call Qatar and apologize for the attack.
That's right.
Apologize and say what? Oops, sorry, I made a mistake. I'm an idiot. He never did any of that.
No, I
Plus,
don't
let
think
me tell
so.
you, the Qataris are very wise people, very sensible
Mm-hmm.
people, extremely mature people. They don't fall into this kind of idiotic traps. Netanyahu was pathetic because he had no choice. He depends on the Americans on a daily basis. He cannot fight a day without American support. So he's going to do whatever is required in front of Donald Trump. But don't ever think for a moment that anyone in the Gulf takes any security guarantee from the Americans seriously.
But are you saying, Ambassador, that the fact is that Qatar realizes it cannot depend on the US to provide security cover even for Al Udeid Air
The
Base?
attack on Doha was intended to give precisely this message
Mm.
that none of you is safe. And the United States has no capacity to protect any of its allies, whatever, however important they might be. You think that Netanyahu did not know that Trump would be upset or not? He didn't care. He also knew that the level of support the United States extends to Israel, blind support, unthinking support, unreflective support, he
Mm.
takes advantage of that. You think any American president has the capacity to tell the Israelis that you will not do this or we will do this? I have not seen in 30 years, 35 years, a single American president reprimand the Israelis for violent misbehavior for their genocide and tell them, if you do not do this, we will not be able to support you. The Israelis have got such a robust base of support through their own lobby in the past, now much more the Christian evangelists and all kinds of people who are who depend on the Israel, who have constituencies supporting them because they are pro-Israel. Israel today cannot be controlled by any power in the United States.
But doesn't that also mean that even that this Qatar UAE sorry US defense treaty is then absolutely meaningless because it's similar to the deal that Saudi Arabia also signed with Pakistan.
I
So
don't know what this. There's no parallel. United States wanted to remind Qatar that we are there to protect you. It is too little and too late. Why they are doing that is because of the big contracts.
yeah,
The main motive force for the Trump administration, for his son-in-law, for Tony Blair, and for all that gang that has got together to create this bogus agreement, they are looking at dollars and cents, the billions of dollars that are owing to them, that will come their way once they get from these countries. You remember when Donald Trump went to the countries, went to Riyadh, and he met all these people. He had 3 summits there, and he met all the Gulf people, and they offered him billions of dollars of contract. And if you put them all together, they were more than a trillion. At that
wow.
time, wasn't it understood by the region that they will be protected? Has there not been this overt agreement and understanding that the Gulf will buy American equipment, give lucrative contracts to the Americans, give strategic support to their plans in the region, and and manage the oil affairs to America's advantage, and in return they will be given security. You
But
have
that
lived in
hasn't
the
happened.
region. You know this extremely well. This is the bargain. This was the
That's right.
bargain with the Americans that goes back 40 to 50 years. The Americans have failed to fulfill their part of the bargain. They are now terrified that at least some of the contracts might not go their way. And therefore,
Oh,
they have given hurriedly this piece of paper. Let me tell you, nobody in the Gulf values any scrap of paper coming from Washington with any degree of as providing any degree of substance or value.
but why then do we have Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, saying the plan was necessary? So where does it leave the Palestinian
These are
Authority?
people who have been beleaguered. They have been killed in very large numbers. Even in the West Bank, 1,000 people have been killed just in the last 2 years. Before that, 600 had been killed. The right wing government of Netanyahu has been deliberately instigating the settlers. The security forces have participated with the settlers in these killings. What do they have? They have said it is necessary because they want to call a halt to the killing. They want to call a halt to the killing. And obviously, when he makes any statement like this, we just take it at face value and move on. And
Yeah,
that's it. I don't think there is any, he knows Palestinians have lived in the region. They know what is going on in Israel. They know where Netanyahu is coming from. Not one of them attaches any degree of credibility to as far as Netanyahu is concerned. Not one of us believes that he has any commitment to peace, he has any commitment to a truce or even a ceasefire.
so basically, what you're saying is that Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to this peace plan, in which he may or may not have had a say because he wanted to please Trump and because he needs
He
US.
wants the hostages back.
He wants the hostages back. Yeah,
Hostages
yeah,
back. He wants that because that is the only thing that his community is agitating. Hundreds of thousands of people have been coming out onto the streets every
that's
week.
right.
They have been agitating for the hostages.
Yeah.
And the hostages, the fact that there are hostages not returned so far is a crucial reminder of the failure of his government to protect his people.
But yet you have people within his government like Bezalel Smotrich and Benjamin wanting to take all of Jerusalem, all of the West Bank, And he's actually, Smotrich has actually called the plan a resounding diplomatic failure, a closing of eyes and turning our backs on all the lessons of October 7th. It will end in tears. Our kids will fight in Gaza again, as Wazir said. So he's rejected the idea of a Palestinian state. He's rejected the idea of
Right wing in Israel is have very little support in terms of numbers, but they are crucial for the stability of the Netanyahu government. They have eight members in the Knesset, 8 members. But because of the way Israeli politics is polarized and fragmented, they become extremely powerful. And they are xenophobic. They are known to be extremely violent, extremely vicious, very racist. Most of them have faced criminal cases against them. No government until Netanyahu in 2022, no government wanted to touch them. They have very short-sighted and specific agenda. I would argue to you, without fear of contradiction, many of them are the mirror image of the Islamic State in terms of their viciousness and their violence and their extremist xenophobic.
as in Islamic State Khorasan.
The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria.
Yeah, yeah. No, but it's very clear. I agree with you, Ambassador. He obviously is just cannot quieten the growing public opinion within Israel that wants an end to Gaza and wants the surviving hostages to be brought back home. They had demonstrations, as you rightly said, outside the defense ministry in Tel Aviv just a couple of days ago. So, the living and the dead hostages, they want them returned, whether it means bringing freeing 2,000 Palestinian prisoners or not. But so, do you actually think the tide is turning against Netanyahu at home and abroad? Because now you have this synagogue which has been attacked in the UK, which must worry the Jews living in Europe.
Every attack of a racist character or an extremist character or a character connected with extreme values, extreme beliefs with regard to faith or ideology, any extremist behavior is obnoxious and unacceptable. And there is no tolerance for that. However, I just want to give an explanation, not a justification, mind you, an explanation. Imagine all these Arabs in the diaspora and large sections of Muslims in the diaspora who watch day after day their brethren, their brothers and sisters and the children being murdered right in front of their eyes. You have seen the shrouds day after day, 30, 40, 50, 60 per day. Journalists murdered. A young woman just a few days ago, 24-year-old, who as a student said, I want to be a journalist and report to people. And her father said, don't do that. It's a very, very strenuous job. But she said, no, this is what I want. And she was shot dead. Targeted killing. There will be, I am sorry to say, there will be certain people who will believe that they will be stirred into violent action. You and I would hate it. We would condemn it. We would not want it. But do remember where they are coming from. Because they have seen for 2 years the wanton violence meted out to their brethren, their sorority and their brethren right in front of their eyes, and no one has come to their assistance. So there is a hate. I don't justify it. I hate it. I wish it wasn't there. But the fact is, these are the well springs.
Where does this leave Hamas, Ambassador? Because, does Hamas have any fight left? Is it still being actively armed and backed by Iran? Because, the Arab leaders want disarmament, they want Hamas defanged. Will Hamas actually walk away after this 22-month war?
Difficult to say. You see, Hamas emerged in a set of circumstances in the 1980s. The Palestinian cause itself has evolved over a period of time when it was overtly secular, but also took violent action in the shape of terrorist attacks and the hijackings of aircraft. At some stage, they found that this is not working. The culmination was the first Intifada, which was, as you know, Israel retaliated very, very harshly. Before that, in 1970, the Jordanian troops had killed a very large number of Palestinians. And you will remember our one of our Pakistani generals was actively involved with that.
Yeah.
The Israelis had also arranged the mass murder of Palestinians in Lebanon by the Christian militia. So this is the background, the Lebanese background, in terms of which Hamas emerged, and it emerged as an Islamic movement. Its assessment was that there is now a failure of the secular approach, and later on, as you know, Yasser Arafat had become accommodative. He
Yes.
addressed the United Nations and he tried to talk on the language of peace. It is in this context that Hamas had emerged as an Islamic movement. It took its inspiration from the Muslim Brotherhood. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, it has taken lethal blows and it will find it very difficult to re-emerge in its old way because Israel will not allow it to emerge as an influential political force. Before we leave this topic, I must also insist on reminding you that Hamas was actively encouraged by the Israeli government as part of divide and rule. At
I
that time,
see.
it was the Fatah and Yasser Arafat who were the credible role players to dilute the influence of Yasser Arafat because he had a larger than life persona. The Israelis actively supported Hamas. Some say that they, in fact, perhaps even created it. I don't have enough knowledge of that, but certainly we know that for the last 40 years that Hamas has been with us, it could not have reached the present stage without active Israeli support. As you
I
know,
have
in
another.
2019, there was an attack on Netanyahu by his cabinet ministers who criticized him for allowing millions of dollars from Qatar to go to Gaza to fund
Yes.
the civil service and the infrastructure. And Netanyahu is quoted as saying that we need to do this, we need to keep the Palestinians divided. The principal threat we face is not from Gaza and from Hamas. We have made them peaceful by putting the money in them. We need to look at the West Bank. So the entire focus of the Israeli government was on the West Bank, and the
That's very
atrocities that they
interesting.
committed then were on the West. They were ill prepared. They thought they had pacified Hamas. There had been constant skirmishes: 2006, 2014, 2016, 2019, 2024, many numerous skirmishes, but never got out of hand. This particular attack 2 years ago was a surprise for the Israel, shock for the Israelis. But I would tell you that people who know this better than I do say that even Hamas was surprised at the extent of their success.
Oh,
They have said, and somebody who has spoken to them told me that they expected to take a few hostages and go back and then call for the release of prisoners. They were surprised at the total collapse of the Israeli army. 400
yes.
Israeli soldiers were killed,
That's right. That's
That's
because
very
they were
interesting.
lulled. They were
and the
lulled into
others
a
were
false
taken.
sense of
They couldn't
security.
take. So many were taken hostage. There was a near total collapse. This is what Netanyahu is afraid of, that it will be investigated and exposed. The total failure of the armed forces.
You're saying that, the Palestinians in Gaza have also, they've also apparently backed the plan, saying that it will end the bombardment and the deaths. So, Hamas could be losing ground support too. That is one
For the
possibility.
language of public opinion, popular support, etc., for a beleaguered people who know only violence and who have experienced only violence. All of us lead, however, some of us lead very comfortable lives, some lead very squalid lives, but they lead lives which involve employment, which involve family members, which involves the flow of resources, something or the other. Can you imagine a life of an ordinary Palestinian in Gaza where there is total squalor,
Yeah.
where there is nothing to look forward to, where there is no income? and there is constant. It's like you are reduced to being beggars.
That's true.
60% unemployment, no economic activity allowed, no supply of water, no supply of electricity, no supply of medicine, no sewage, no, not even minimal human dignity. If you read the literature from these people, they say that our life is so sordid. When asked, why do you throw a stone at the Israeli and take a bullet? And the answer is, our life is so sordid, right? We have nothing to look forward to. I would rather die with dignity. I will pick up a stone, throw it at the Israeli, and take the bullet and end my life. But I would have died with dignity. And
Dignity.
that is something very few of us will fully appreciate, because none of us knows how desperate, how meaningless, and how squalid their life is.
But this was before the Hamas attack and the counter attack by the Israelis, because there's a lot which has been written about the fact that they had farms, flourishing farms, where they grew, they had dairy farms, and they grew olives and so on and so forth. So there are charges now.
The per capita income is negligible.
Yes,
So
I
let us
know.
be
I
very
know. I've been to
objective
the
here.
West Bank and
There is,
I saw
whatever
Hamas.
people do, they try their best to
Yeah,
eke out an existence. I'm giving
yeah.
you the picture which was as a whole. Overall, picture from 2006 to today is a picture, or is squalid.
It's also there is also post the war, ambassador. If this war does come to an end, there are charges that are being made against the Israeli Defense Forces for using phosphorus, which has contaminated the water and the soil. And they're saying that this building debris, which is now all over because they've flattened Gaza, has used carcinogenic materials like asbestos that could kill thousands more if there's a stoppage to this bombing. So these are considered, these would be, in any other context, they would be considered war crimes. And do you know if there's any possibility of any of these humanitarian agencies actually going to hold, uh, whether it's Washington or the Netanyahu government is responsible, because Netanyahu should is the one who instigated this.
I am not able to recall any instance where the victims of war crimes, crimes committed by the winner, have been compensated. Never,
Hmm.
never, never. You are aware of the wanton behavior of US armed forces in Afghanistan and Iraq, and Vietnam before that.
Hmm.
There's a very long record of gross misconduct and abuse. In the case of Abu Ghraib, it is actually documented on television, with pictures.
Hmm.
I do
Yes.
not believe a single person ever has been penalized. I do not see any likelihood of these war criminals from Israel being punished, just as I have seen no evidence of anybody from the United States punished, despite the genocide and the mass murder they have committed when they attacked Afghanistan and later on committed. The only point I will make, and I say this with a very heavy heart, at the end of the day, even the soldiers are human beings. They are traumatized by the abuse in which they participate. And my remark to you is this, my observation to you is this: hundreds of thousands of American servicemen who have returned from Vietnam and returned from Afghanistan and returned from Iraq, they've come back mentally damaged,
That's true.
perhaps even destroyed. That is the only punishment given to them in this life for their behavior.
What
They,
about Iran, Ambassador? What does this mean for Iran? Because a Hezbollah leader in Beirut said on Ashura Day
you
that
see,
they will
Iran, the
not.
situation is it's only half done. The Israelis wanted to use the occasion of total American support to attack Iran and to destroy their nuclear facilities. Very quickly after the first and second day, it was clear that Israeli weaponry had inflicted no damage at all. which is when Netanyahu was able to encourage Donald Trump to participate. And he encouraged him by the prospect by talking about regime change in Iran. And as you
which
know, there
didn't
is very
happen.
little application of the mind in the top leadership in the United States. And as a result, United States got into the picture. And then within a few hours of the end of when even before the last plane returned, Donald Trump declared full victory. And after that, his own Pentagon said that they do not believe that even minimal damage had been done to the facilities, and that general has been sacked because he
Mm.
had the temerity to make this remark. So it is not clear what has happened. So what the Western countries have done is, because they don't want to have a renewal of conflict and they don't know whether it will be successful or not, they've renewed the sanctions. So they so-called snapback. I
Yeah.
think the Iranians would like to tide over. We are still in a conflict scenario. No, every day there are news reports that Israel may launch another attack. Israel may launch an attack along with the United States, things like that. Whatever Iran does, they said we are going to talk to IAEA or what have you. Instead of giving them the due respect and engaging in a serious dialogue, we don't see any evidence of that. So, what is happening now is the snapback sanctions. Russia has criticized it very harshly, and I think China is opposed to it as well. Having said this, what we should look at now is the medium term. In the short term, we are not able to see the way things will flow because we are still in an ongoing conflict. Iran will attempt to recover some of its strategic value over a period of time, possibly through economic achievement, through some economic reform, etc. And they, which is hopefully with the help of China and Russia, they
But
will be able
Ambassador,
to make
the
progress.
fact
You
is
can
that
now go
Iran,
forward. I think your guest has come.
but also because the axis of resistance, which Iran had set up has been snapped. Bashar al-Assad has been replaced by al-Shara, who's apparently an Israeli plant, and the Houthis continue to be on the attack. So Iran, as you said, is facing fresh sanctions. But can it actually, regroup and continue to pose a threat to Israel and its nuclear facilities, even because it
May I
did pierce
suggest
the
that you
Iron
put
Dome.
this question to Mr. Parsi? He is the
Okay,
authority on Iran and he has just joined
Professor
us. So
Professor
perhaps he will be
Parsi,
able to enlighten both of us.
Professor Parsi, do join
Yes,
in.
thank you very much. Well, I think when it comes to the missiles capabilities of Iran, they are fairly untouched. So they would most likely be able to continue doing that. It will become a cat and mouse game about whether Israel can destroy the launcher before the Iranians can use them. But for Iran, that is, in a sense, the last resort, what has now become the first resort, exactly for the reasons that you've already mentioned, which is that the Houthis and the Hezbollah and others have been subdued, if not destroyed. And they no longer pose a deterrence to Israel. So the Israelis are quite comfortable with attacking Iran directly. And that is the real headache for the decision makers in Tehran.
Now, the biggest question of this show, basically, on Palestinian statehood. After initially backing Trump's plan, Netanyahu's expressed doubts about it. He's basically saying he's obviously caught in a bind. He's losing support at home. He's losing support abroad. The Jews are facing a backlash. I mean, as we saw with this synagogue attack in UK. So, can I have your opinions, please, Professor Parsi, and then after that, Ambassador? I mean, this is one plan, but there are two very different versions of what it actually what it actually means, because it's quite ambiguous. Everyone's got a different interpretation. Is the Palestinian statehood actually possible in real terms, or is it just a big sham?
Well, I mean, in one sense, we have to remember that when you're negotiating and mediating, ambiguity sometimes can be useful because it allows people to, in a sense, find comfort within a space that is not so narrow as to pin them down. And then later you can try and get them to actually be on the same page. But in this case, the ambiguity is not intentional. It is an expression of the dysfunctionality of the Trump administration because they do not have a bureaucratic process. They do not have an institutional process through which they can produce more detailed and direct timelines and plans for how to bring something about anything, whether it's a nuclear issue in Iran or, in this case, a Palestinian state. And that ambiguity then allows Netanyahu to walk back just about any, whatever minuscule commitment he has made in terms of any kind of gifts to the Palestinians he might have been forced to nod to when he was in a meeting with Trump. So at this point, it just means that the Israelis will probably be allowed to continue doing more or less what they want. And the Palestinians still don't have either a unified position of their own, nor do they have a counterpart in Israel or the Americans that are actually serious about negotiating.
So basically, Netanyahu believes that the deal is a victory over Hamas because he's definitely, he's steadfastly denied any Palestinian right to the land between the River Jordan and the sea. And the Palestinians somehow believe that the state is in the works, which is completely wrong. I mean, they've even offered to edit textbooks that vilify Israel. They've stopped payment to families of Palestinian prisoners and martyrs. Isn't that true, Ambassador? So why are the Palestinians so caught up with this idea that a statehood could be in the works?
See, that point I will make to you is a little out of the box. Demographically, that two-state solution is there in front of your eyes. The combined population of non-Jews in the West Bank and in Gaza and in East Jerusalem and the 20% non-Jews who are Israeli citizens, if this population is taken together, they are likely to be about 7 million. There will be more than the Jewish population. So you already have an equal balance between Jewish and non-Jewish. If Israel wants to retain its Jewish character, it cannot but have another entity where the non-Jews are accommodated. And that is the occupied, there are the occupied territories. The second thing that I will say for the Messianic, those who believe in Messianism, they say from the Old Testament that they have sanction from the good Lord that Jews are the chosen people and they have exclusive right over the promised land. The promised land is not defined. We are just told that this is known as the promised land and that they have exclusive authority and that they are allowed extermination of the non-Jews, exile, or enslavement. So they have tried all three, right? They have tried extermination, they have tried enslavement, and they have tried exile. I'm going to say this to you, and it is very painful to hear. Israel is today carried out genocide. 65,000, 66,000 Palestinians are dead. Demographically, it has not changed the situation in the occupied territories. There were 3.6 million people in the West Bank and 2.3 million people in Gaza. That number has not changed. I will add one more thing. Genocide was tried out on a huge scale by the Nazis. And in 6 years, they killed 6 million people. And yet, within 3 years, you had the proclamation of the State of Israel. And from that time, they killed 6 million, who were 2/3 the population of Europe. And today, the Jews are perhaps one of the most influential communities in the world. What is the answer? What would I like to say to my Israeli brother? Genocide will not serve any useful purpose. Your own example tells me that a genocide was tried out against you and you triumphed over it.
That's true. That's right.
And therefore, how you are trying out genocide against the Palestinians. I'm not pretending that they will have a state in 3 years, but I have used two arguments before you. I have used the demographic argument of two-state solution, which is staring at you in the face, two occupied territories. We can dispute a bit about East Jerusalem, and instead of giving you East Jerusalem, you do with something. All of these are interim measures. Let us not imagine this is cast in stone forever. I imagine there will be a period of time, possibly after half a century or a century, when all these people will live together. But till then, at least have a territorial arrangement so that you don't step on each other.
Exactly. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Professor Parsi, if I can just bring you in on Turkey. I mean, we've talked about Iran and how it's probably, buffeted by these sanctions and having to recraft its strategy on how to deal with Israel. What about Turkey? Turkey is a new entrant in the game. It's made very critical remarks about India at the UN, but that is interesting, isn't it?
I think Turkey has been trying to play a role and has played a role for quite some time. I think, however, that it has been very pragmatic in exactly how much political capital it wants to expend. So, for its domestic audience purposes, it does show its enmity to Israel, but then in reality, it doesn't always follow through. But I think with Gaza, and especially perhaps rather the competition in Syria between Turkey and Israel, where I don't see that they're finding a modus vivendi between them, that will probably tip the scale towards a more robust, if you will, and consistent position vis-a-vis Israel.
So basically, you're saying that Turkey is just there, just a name only.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I think it's sometimes it's clear that the rhetorical level is not necessarily followed through in actions. Economic
Okay.
relations are not broken off. Just
I get that.
you're
I'm running out of time. So could you, Professor Parsi, give us a quick, concluding kind of thing on what the way forward is going to be?
Yes, of course. I think this has been a lot of political theater on the part of Trump and Netanyahu, and everyone is going to play along because they cannot afford not to. But I doubt very much is going to come out of it, and that means that we'll have to go back to the more concrete plans like the Hague Group and others who are trying to put forward something more consistent and comprehensive. The question, however, is whether the US and the European Union are willing to push the Israelis to come to the table and be serious.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Professor. Ambassador, I was also curious about India's stand in this US reconfiguration. Of this greater Middle East that they're talking about. India's welcomed Trump's Gaza plan. They've described it as a viable pathway to lasting peace, security, and development for both Israelis and Palestinians. We've stood for Palestinian statehood. We've recognized the PLO. And in this vote in the New York Declaration on Peaceful Settlement at the UN, it's been also very proactive in the sense it said that it wants to even play a role in Gaza's reconstruction. As the Israeli ambassador to India, this Reuven Azar, has said, India is the new builder of the world. We want you to build our world as well. Is that, are we talking through our hat? I mean, is this for real?
India is not a serious presence in West Asia in terms of the very complex issues that have overwhelmed the region. The issues relating to the Palestine cause, the emerging insecurity among the Gulf states, the problem of Iran, the rising profile of China, the emerging interventions of Russia. All of these are very significant developments on the West Asian stage. West Asia is also very closely linked, both on the one hand to Eurasia and on the other hand to the Indian Ocean. This is our strategic space. This is our strategic space. Central Asia, that is Eurasia, West Asia, Indian Ocean. I find ourselves strategically totally absent from any of these territories. It is as if, and this is our space. I mean, this everything that is happening there impinges on our crucial national interest, and yet we have got a very distant view of it. We are not actively involved in any of the developments there. We barely are coherent with regard to what we should say on a particular occasion. The response to the peace plan is an embarrassment, as this discussion has shown. It is not a peace plan, it's a surrender document and promises no peace. It is not viable even for a moment and does not promise any peace whatsoever. It is a story of very deep anguish for people like me who devoted, and you, who devoted your life to working in the region, explaining the region to India, agitating for a very active Indian role in the region, going beyond oil and community, becoming strategically involved in the important region. But I think everything that we have said over so many years has cut no ice at all at home. And I think that it's a blank slate as far as we are concerned.
So, in conclusion, let me say that it's a very clear view that Israel is the clear winner in all of this. And it's Hamas that is being forced to exit Gaza after nearly 2 years of opening Palestinians up to Israeli hellfire. A Hamas that unfortunately invited the wrath of Israel on Gaza but was unable to protect them. But then again, why would Hamas agree to walk out of Gaza? The Israelis haven't been able to dislodge them even after 22 months. So this is not a roadmap to peace, is what is the general conclusion that we
Say
must
only one
draw.
small point before you go further. To identify winners and losers so starkly does not do justice to the complexity of the situation. The United States, in the first few days of the Iraq war, declared themselves winners and they said mission accomplished. In the
They
case
did.
of Afghanistan, in the first few days, they destroyed the Taliban and they declared that they were victorious. Over the next few years, it was very obvious that the Americans had lost, that they lost in Afghanistan and they lost in Iraq. Mass murder, which is committed by a military force, which is totally asymmetrical in terms of the opponent. You kill large numbers of civilians and you call it victory. I don't believe that is the case. To declare winners and losers, let us wait for a while and let the waters flow, and then we will get a better picture.
So if the Gaza plan is to work, both the Palestinians have and the Israelis will have to work and negotiate their way through it. I mean, the Palestinians basically need to also step up because these are multiple opportunities for, if talks do happen, for it to break down. So most countries believe that any solution that does not lead to Palestinian state will not bring peace, which goes against what the present government in Israel stands for. The Gaza plan, therefore, is both a challenge and an opportunity, and I also think not geared to succeed. Thank you very much, viewers, for watching. Thank you, Ambassador Talmeez Ahmed, for your views. Thank you, Professor Rouzbeh Parsi, for sharing your insights. Thank you, viewers, for watching Global Express. Please click on the new Indian Express and watch and share.